Susan has this wonderful philosophy that I find to be contagious. And we wanted to really share that philosophy, to share that vision, and to share, most importantly, that passion that Susan has with our customer base, with our partners, with our community. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Susan. Just a few housekeeping items. We have our Hatch team over here, Rachel, and a few of others of us who are going to be managing the chat section. So at any given point, if you have any questions, you can go directly into the chat section and answer those questions, ask those questions in there while she's presenting. And then we are going to do a little bit of a Q&A after. So we're going to allow people, when I asked Susan, do you want this to be a webinar or do you want this to be a meeting? And a webinar, you can't see people. And she, without hesitation, said, no, this has got to be a meeting where I can see people, where we can talk, where we can have conversation. So we're going to have some time at the end for conversation. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I give us over to Susan Kramer. Take it away, Susan.
Thanks. Great to see everyone. Before we start, I want to let you know that in the chat, I've asked for your pain points. Okay, so what are your pain points? I see Chris's pain point, finding new donors. We'll definitely address that in this conversation. So just a little bit about my journey. I like to say that I'm the first CEO that ever became, I'm the first hairdresser that ever became the CEO of a major federation. So my career started in Baltimore, Maryland, and then College Park. I actually owned a hair salon. What did that teach me? Taught me how to build a relationship in 3 minutes or less with anybody. So although my mother was horrified when I made the choice to leave college and do that, it was one of the best decisions I ever made for my career today, because this career has been just absolute blessing. I spent 20 years in the federation system. I was aspirational to be the CEO of a major federation. That was fun, brave to do that. Bravest thing I ever did was leave. Then I went to Momentum, JWRP. I worked with them for about 5 years. That gave me knowledge of opening up new markets. I did not inherit a book of business when I got there. Had to create it from nothing, something from nothing. And then 5 years ago, I launched Susan Kramer Consulting. I kind of consider this my legacy work. This is the work where I get to impart all those things that I learned along the way. The creation of my methodology comes from intuition and art, and now it is a sort of defined method for fund development. Just give me 1 minute where I can look in this chat. Events-based fundraising, flakiness. Okay, post-pandemic. Great. I'm going to address the events. The flakiness, I'm not 100% sure I can address, but we might be able to deal with that in a Q&A. So how do you fundraise? Fundraising is really, it's fundraising in 7 letters. That's what I like to communicate. People started asking me, Susan, what do you do? And how do you do it? So I realized that there is absolutely a method to the fundraising I've done and the coaching that I've done on the team. Fundraising is about the individuals. I focus on the human-centered design element of fundraising. And so this is the I stands for individuals. You take a group of individuals, you connect them with your community, engage and educate them, and that equals your donors, investors, leaders, and advocates. In no uncertain terms, when you speak to the donors, they will tell you that engagement, they'll say in these words, why did I give a transformational gift? Because I am engaged, I am involved, and I am connected. If you're soliciting somebody on the individual level, an individual, you will get a transactional gift. These are your event-based gifts and your crowdfunding gifts. Those gifts are transactional. The journey that you have to take is to get to the place where you can solicit the donor for that transformational gift. Transformation for a donor comes from engagement, involvement, and connection. I've interviewed over 150 major donors since COVID. Every one of them says, the reason I'm giving a transformational gift is because I am engaged, involved, connected. So you can think of the individuals that you have brought into your network. You could think about, I'm just going to, NCSY, a group of students in your network. You've created a community. What's happening with the parents? Is there a community there that you are engaging? So I find that in the nonprofits, often we are relying on the fishing expedition of crowdfunding and events. And I call it a fishing expedition because for those of us who are old enough to remember star-kissed tuna, we only catch tunas, no dolphins in the nets. We are actually looking for the dolphins. Those are fishing expeditions. Now, what happens after you go fishing? I've learned that this engagement leading to donors is a art and science. So I'm going to stop sharing for 1 sec. So when we talk about art and science, the art is the storytelling, the narrative, the hunch, the intuition, maybe even a little bit about their past giving. You have got to integrate the art with the science, and that's where something like Hatch comes in. I promise you, Chris, your next major donor is hiding in plain sight. They are right in front of you. Because what we have neglected to do is data mine our existing donor base to find where is the capacity for the donor to give more. We rely on the current giving patterns of the donor, making an assumption that their current giving pattern is their capacity gift. And it is not. It especially is not if you have not data mined them. And I can tell you that I just interviewed a donor with a Chicago client. The donor is giving the nonprofit $5,000, which is in fact a rounding error on the $21 million that they've given away. But my client doesn't know that that donor has given away $21 million. Why? Because they've never used the data on the foundation and the donor to understand this. They're a $5,000 donor for the nonprofit. That's a generous gift. Amen. It's just the beginning. If you don't know enough about the donor, I want you to make an assumption that there is more capacity there. So let's look at the whole, well, we're only 2 people on our team. We really don't have time to do any major work in the new gift acquisition space. What would you tell us to do, Susan, around this? So this axis that we have here, axis, engagement. This is the engagement. My friend Abraham. So thank you, Abraham. So when we are inside of, I only have time for some, I don't have time for all of this. I don't have time for it. What would you advise me to do? So what I'm going to advise people to do is I need them to focus on your A's. So, sorry, Zoom changed this and they didn't ask me if I wanted them to. You know how that goes, guys? Why did they do that? Okay, so we're going to focus on the A's. Your A are high capacity, high engagement. Now, your capacity has to be put through a data mining document. You need to see not perceived capacity. Now, I know how people live, work, and play. That's intuition, hunch. You need to add the data, art, and science. And you want to understand who has the highest capacity and who is most engaged. This is the prospect list that you are going to be starting with. High capacity, high engagement, because in no uncertain terms, engagement equals giving. In no uncertain terms. Wealthy does not equal transformational giving to your nonprofit. And we all know all the wealthy people in your city. That's nice. It still does not equal giving a capacity gift to your organization. They need to be engaged. Your Bs are high capacity and low engagement. So what are we going to do with that? We are going to figure out how to move them on an engagement continuum. Your Cs are your connectors. These are the people that have low capacity but high engagement. And who do they know and who can they connect you to? And I like to say that these people are just very nice people, but they're not on our chart. A's, high capacity, high engagement. Those are your prospects for increased giving. If you're looking for new donors, look in your $100 donors that the data tells you has the capacity or has given more money to other nonprofits. We call them your hidden gems. They've given more money to someone else than to you. Are they very engaged? Let's get them engaged and move them along this continuum. And then your connectors. When we move through this, we're seeing where we have the opportunity for growth. Wait a minute, quick. Oh, okay. So I'm getting just a little distracted by that. Okay. So this is, okay. So now I want to address the idea, well, they're wealthy, and I want to solicit wealthy people. Now I've been heard to say, that's cute. Doesn't work that way. This is the ring theory on foundations and donors. And you know, when there were hieroglyphics in the caves, that was me. I was the hieroglyphics. In the center of the ring theory, that is people who know you and love you. They know you and they love you. That's the engagement. The second part of the ring is I know somebody who knows you and loves you. So I have a passion for a particular project. I have a friend that I know is a philanthropist. I'm going to introduce her to your project. We now have the second degree of sort of commitment and love for your organization. The third ring here, what we're dealing with here is we are dealing with a perceived alignment. This is through your data. Now, let's say you're checking out a foundation, you find out what they're interested in, and they're interested in Holocaust studies, and you have Holocaust studies in your organization. So we have a perception of alignment. The next thing you have to do is test this perception, prove or disprove that there is alignment. This comes from discovery. There is foundation discovery and there is donor discovery. In the foundation discovery, you want to speak to the program officers. They are the most helpful people. You just have to know that they're helpful and that they want to speak to you. Why? Because if you are applying, if you're writing a cold grant to a fourth tier, no perceived alignment, no test of your alignment, no proving of it, and no discussion, I'm going to quote Rabbi Wahlberg in Baltimore, and I'm going to say, forget about it. One word, forget about it. It is not a good use of your time to be writing or hiring somebody to write proposals for foundations where you have no proving of your alignment. So even if it's not a fit today, there is a possibility it will be a fit in the future for the donor or the foundation. So very, very valuable that you're looking at it from this perspective. So if we go back to what's critical is to understand the art and science and move into donor discovery. I say passion plus action equals results. The passion of the donor plus the action of the nonprofit is where you get your results. How do you understand the passion of the donor? Oh, good. I like that, Ben. Passion plus action is passion. Okay. Passion plus action. I can promise you that you do not know enough about the passion of the donor if every time you meet with them, the conversation is not about their philanthropy. So, did you run into them at another event? Are you standing with them at a dinner party? What are you talking to them about? I know the ladies that I talk to as female philanthropists, shopping, food, exercise, kids' school, college issues. You're not talking to them about their philanthropy. I have a course called Unapologetic Fundraising because no matter where I go or what I'm doing, because I am an unapologetic fundraiser, I am learning more about the donors. Always. And their philanthropy, unapologetically. Nothing to apologize for. Example, I'm at a dinner party. I'm in Aspen. There's somebody sitting next to me at the dinner table. I look at outward signs of wealth, and I know that there are knockoffs and fakes for anything that anybody could ever wear. But why are they wearing all the knockoffs in the first place if they're knockoffs? I'm always looking for visual signs of wealth, and I'm curious about them. So I've got one of them sitting next to me at the dinner table, and I said to him, do you mind if I talk to you about your philanthropy? I never met this person in my life. I'm from Denver. They're from Detroit. We were at a dinner party in Aspen. No. I said to him, where did you learn to give? He said, from my wife. I said, tell me about that. He said, well, she won't let me buy a new car unless I give the same amount to tzedakah. And I said, did it stop you from buying cars? He said, no. Now, this is not Hondas that he's buying, right? The first question I always ask is, where did you learn to give? Why? Because it opens up a heart space. Everyone has a magnificent story of where they learned to give. And now we're into the heart of the donor. We're into something that's emotional for them. I have one that I asked, where did you learn to give? And she said, when I was growing up, my dad used to sell salamis for the synagogue out of a red wagon. When you ask me where I learned to give, what I say to you is, I walked the neighborhood holding my father's hand, walking around. We couldn't go home until all those salamis were sold. That's a heart space. The third example I'll give you of somebody telling me where she learned to give was an aha moment for the woman. Let's say Mary. She said, oh my gosh. I said, well, tell me the story. Every Sunday morning, there was a ritual in my home when we were growing up. We were going to go to church, but on the way was the kitchen where my mother was painting her fingernails. Now, when she tells the story, I could see her mom smell the fingernail polish, etc. When mom was finished painting her fingernails, she tied the bow in the back of my dress. She wrote a check for the church. I watched her do it. We ran to the Woody station wagon and off we went. I learned to give from watching my mother every Sunday morning write a check to the church. I said, so what's the aha? My gift to the church is direct deposit or a credit card. My children never see what I saw. So her aha was, I'm not teaching my kids what my parents taught me. I better start either writing checks or let them know that this is happening, because where did you learn to give? Passion plus action. I ask people their most meaningful gift. What's the most meaningful gift you've ever given? These are beautiful answers. Almost every philanthropist says the same thing. The amount or the place. I'm like, tell me which is it? So I was at a conference, not my conference. There was some gentleman sitting by himself, a person sitting by themselves. Walk right over. Do you mind if I talk to you about your philanthropy? Why? Why, strangers? You are learning more about the mindset and thinking of the donor when you ask donor-related questions. You have to begin to ask your market about them as donors. Parents, important. College parents, really important. Pro-Israel advocates, all important. Hunger, safety and security, all important. But what about their philanthropy? What about them as givers? So I asked this gentleman, let's call him Phil, sitting by himself at a conference, his most meaningful gift. He says to me, the amount or the place? Either. The $1 million endowment to his fraternity, the 10-year gift is his most meaningful gift. Why? Because he was a little bit of an outsider in high school, really didn't have any friends. Joining this fraternity gave him the kind of life he wanted and a career that made him successful enough to give $1 million gift. It's his payback to the fraternity. Now, he was grateful to something that took him on his way. It was out of gratitude to the organization. For this donor, I'm looking to provide something of gratitude. Now, you know what else I thought? He told me it was a 10-year gift of $1 million. I want to know what's happening in year 11. The money's not going away. The nonprofit did not know that this gift even existed. And I'm like, hello, year 11. We could potentially cultivate a gift like this. I'm going to give one more example of finding out what a donor cares about. I have a friend in town. Her name is Nancy. We were doing a donor discovery interview, and I learned that she cares about mental health, animals, education, and children. There is a day school in St. Louis that has a service dog. Animals, mental health, days, education, kids. If you didn't know about Nancy's passions, you might try to sell her on a computer lab. Why? Because you need a computer lab. Your school needs a computer lab. So you are sell, tell, and convince with these donors that you need a computer lab. So you're off and running because the president of the board, whoever says, we got to fund this computer lab. So what are you neglecting? You're neglecting that what matters to this donor who has the capacity to give the money cares about the service dog. Let her fund the service dog and move that budget item to your computer lab. Do you hear? If we understand what is important to the donor, we don't show up there with an annual report that we work through the annual report, and then we say, now would you consider making a gift of $10,000? That is treating the donor like an ATM machine. I picture it all the time. The card goes in their mouth, the card comes out. The donor is not an ATM machine. The donor is a philanthropist who has had the privilege of being on the giving end and help them light up their giving. More examples of the questions I ask. Where did you learn to give? Wait a minute. What if the computer lab had a service dog? Is that what you're going to ask me? No. Was that right? Exactly. Exactly. Whoever had that great sense of humor. Thank you. So, but you hear, Nancy would give to a service dog. She's a Denver donor. It's a St. Louis school. What if I had service dogs? I'd be going right to her day and night, Nancy, and she would be funding them. She would be funding them happily. Okay, so the other types of questions I ask, really important. Where did you learn to give? Why do you give? Why do you give? More information. Take notes. Listen for themes. I can tell you that the donor will reveal to you very quickly if they operate from the thinking or feeling side of their brain. Myers-Briggs will call us all out as thinkers or feelers. We're in the nonprofit sector. I'll bet you there's a lot of feelers in here. But thinkers or feelers, if a donor talks to you about how it feels right, it feels this way, it feels that way, don't bring them brain surgery, data, analytics, impact reports, percentages. Don't bring that to them. Have it in your presentation, but lead with the stories because they've told you with their language, how does it feel? How does it feel to be in this space? So it's separating your thinkers and feelers by interviewing the donors. Okay, now we move to where did you learn to give? Why do you give? What's the most meaningful gift you've ever given and why? Because the why of the most meaningful gift will give you more clues. We're like Sherlock Holmes here. You're going to get more clues when you find out their most meaningful gift. I always ask them to give me a quote about their giving. A quote. The quotes are phenomenal. Hearses have no luggage racks. What am I taking with me? I give with my soul. I give because of how grateful I am for what I have. Real quotes. Every one of them has to think about them. And they say to me, wow, I never thought about that. I'm like, okay, let's think about it. I also asked them a time they gave more than they anticipated they would give. And just last week, I heard about a $250,000 gift, which was more than they ever thought they would give because the story of the at-risk population that was being served by this nonprofit resonated so deeply with the funder. At-risk population, leg up to the underdog. If you're a school, you're soliciting this donor for scholarships, and you are bringing the story of scholarships. You hear? Because they told you that they increase their gift sixfold, if that's the math, because of the impact that they had. So super, super important that we are listening to the donors. Here I am in Denver, Colorado. I believe I know way more about our donors than the CEO of the Federation, because this is what I do. I run around and ask people these kind of questions. Last thought on these questions is, the last thought on the question is, have you ever had a solicitation gone terribly wrong? The donors have told me, no, I don't want to do the asking. I don't want to do the asking. Javi, I'll answer your question. Yes. I don't want to do the asking. The only time I feel like it's gone wrong is where they pressure me and make me feel guilty. That is a solicitation gone wrong. Pressure, you went there to sell them something. We're not selling things to the donors. We're not convincing them. And when I'm coaching someone, they go, yeah, but how do I convince them? I'm like, we are going back to the first chapter of this book. We are not convincing them. We are excavating their passion to align with our action, and we are getting results that way. Where do I do these interviews, to answer Javi's question? There's two ways I do them. One is I pepper them. Yeah, guilt, no guilt. Love, Pen, you're funny. I like it. Okay, so you got all the sayings. So the pressure, wait, where do I do that? So two ways I do this. I do these interviews. One way is to pepper them wherever I am. You're at the annual meeting. We're in annual meeting season, right? You're standing in the back of the room with your cocktail. You're talking to somebody and you say to them, do you mind if I just ask you a couple questions about your philanthropy? Just pepper these questions around your daily life, okay? Pepper them. The other way to do them, which has a lot more impact, is I ask the donor, would you be willing to jump on a 40-minute Zoom with me? I just want to ask you some questions about your philanthropy. I do it with clients. So I would say to Ben, pick one of your philanthropists. Let's do a Zoom call with them. I will model discovery. It takes about 40 minutes. I will model the discovery interview for you. You will see the rhythm of it, sort of get a sense of its ethos. You do that. I model it. And then you're on your way because you watch it. You want me to do it a second time? Fine. We probably should have some recordings of me doing these interviews so that you have access to those type of recordings. I have never had a donor that felt it was a waste of time. Never. I've always had donors say, wow, I never thought about this, because we don't talk to them about their philanthropy. Now, guess what? The best is the couples. So Phyllis and Bernie, you get their age by how old they are. They're on a call together, a Zoom that I am modeling for their fundraiser. And I say to Phyllis and Bernie, what's the most meaningful gift you've ever given? The pleasure they took from learning that for both of them, it was the same gift. They didn't know that. And they are in their 70s and they are seasoned philanthropists, and neither one of them knew the most meaningful gift they had ever given. There's also, when I say, what's the most meaningful gift you've given? And somebody says to me, the sweater that I knit for my cousin, I'm like, this is not a philanthropist. What's the most meaningful gift you've ever given? Forgiveness. I'm like, cool. They're not philanthropists, because although those are lovely, lovely answers, I'm after something different. And lo and behold, we data mine them, the two, sweater and forgiveness, and they are not on record very large philanthropists. So it's either peppered, Javi, back to you, it's either peppered or it's really an intentional. Would you mind meeting with me? I'm working with this coach. I attended this webinar. I participated in this class. As a result of that, I've got some new things that I want to try out in my career, in this journey for this nonprofit. Would you mind helping me? Would you mind helping me? I just want to ask you some questions about your philanthropy. Have coffee with them. Ask them the questions. Take notes. Why? Because you take the notes, they feel like what they're saying is very important. And your notes allow you to come back from the coffee, from the Zoom, whatever, with your notes and circle themes. You'll circle, for some people, they said feels. 27 times in 40 minutes. I'm like, how does this feel? How did this conversation feel? Okay. Often ask this, Shaul, often ask this. You are, yes, ultimately leading up to a gift. You are a fundraiser after all. However,
Well, Susan, I love that question. So let's call out the comment. Shoal is asking, won't donors think the request for a Zoom is ultimately a lead up to asking them for a gift? Go ahead, Susan.
yeah, for sure, because that's what we do. We're transparent. We are fundraisers. We are not buying, Teslas and islands. We are providing an opportunity for them to do good with their money. Yes, of course, they'll know. They should know. I have had people ask me the same question, and in the interview, I have said to the fundraiser, ask the philanthropist if they think that this is inauthentic or bait and switch. Ask them in front of me, do you think this is inauthentic? The donors say, no, it's really cool that you actually want to know about me as a philanthropist, because your prior meetings, you probably went to sell them something and get a transactional gift because you got to close the campaign, because you got deadlines, you got budgets. So if done in a, I'm disarming, it's like, this is what I'm doing. I want to know this about you. Never ask for a gift at the discovery. Never. You have compromised your integrity of wanting to learn more about them as a philanthropist if you ask them on the call. And I have only had one professional do the ask on the call. I wanted to reach through the screen. We made a commitment to the donor that we were not going to ask for the money on this call. Don't. You step away, you process the themes, and then you have the opportunity to call them back and say, as a result of our conversation, I took the liberty to craft some thoughts on what might inspire you as a giver. Now, this is if they're engaged. If they're not engaged, you got to do this interview and figure out how to engage them. But I've taken the liberty to craft a proposal. We did a donor discovery, a client and me, we did a donor discovery, and we went to lunch and we crafted a proposal asking for 3 potential funding opportunities, each cost $15,000. The donor said we were in the right target area, and the 3 things that we presented were totally aligned with what she was passionate about. That document would never have been created unless we had the interview prior. As a result of, again, art, this storytelling, science, what does the data tell you is their capacity? Align them through this journey. So the donors have not thought it was inauthentic or bait and switch. They have been grateful for the conversation. Practice a little bit on somebody that is a friend that is not even a donor, and let them see that really, really, you just want to help them understand more about their giving or not giving. Because another question is, what have you taught your children or grandchildren? And some people have done a beautiful, beautiful job of passing on the legacy of giving, and some haven't even thought about it. So when somebody thinks about the legacy, I can share Mark's story from Dallas, and his story was, when my grandchildren got old enough to understand this concept, I give them 12 checks for $100 on their birthday. And together each month, we determine where each check will go. For the grandparents on this call, do you know how many grandparents I have inspired to think this way? That you give your $20 checks, $10 checks, give them something that you sit with them and figure out. For those of us with younger grandchildren, Sesame Street, Elmo, circa 2016, Save, Share, Spend. Elmo has a little video on Save, Share, Spend. Get the Save, Spend, and Share jar and start interacting with your grandchildren who can understand that concept. Okay, I'm going to move on to sort of a last conversation about us as fundraisers with my whiteboard screen before we open it up for questions and answers. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about sort of critical aspects of you as a fundraiser and where I see your success points, I like to affectionately call this soda. So what we're doing is, what is critical as a fundraiser? The first is know yourself. Know who you are. Know your temperament. I don't care. Enneagram, Hogan Executive Analysis, Strength Finders, PACE, DISC, pick one. Myers-Briggs, just know you. Because your job is to flex your temperament for the donor. That's why I say thinkers or feelers. I'm a feeler, but if I'm sitting with the CFO of a major organization, I am going to turn into a thinker. And I did have a colleague once say to me, oh my goodness, I met that donor and I told them story after story after story after story. Their eyes were rolling back in their head. I didn't even know if they cared. They were thinkers, but I didn't do that. Know yourself and your temperament. Know what is your money narrative. I have heard many fundraisers say that their money narrative was when they grew up, there was never enough. They felt like they were a burden for their parents and waste not, want not. Any money narrative could get in your space right now around asking people to give you their money. So you want to know yourself and your money narrative. And if there is one that was not enough, don't make that assumption about the donor. So sometimes we carry that with us. We're pretty self-aware about what our money narrative was and how it could get in the space. So you have to know yourself. So what you feel and learned about money and what is your temperament. Know your organization. This is where I call for subject matter expertise. I want my landscaper to be a subject matter expert. I want my doctor to be a subject matter expert, etc. Are you a subject matter expert in this industry, this nonprofit sector? Do you read materials around fundraising, nonprofits, whole thing is your LinkedIn feed? Do you have things about this sector? If you don't, let's get this expertise. I really believe that a lot of my success came from my insatiable curiosity about how this industry worked and my ability to say to people, I read an article, I participated in a webinar, I just saw that the donor advised funds are now under question around, can we get the same laws for those that we have for the foundations? I try to keep up. Still, today, after a lot of years, I try to keep up because if I'm a subject matter expert, guess what your donors are in their field? Subject matter experts. It's how they got the wealth in the first place. Inherited is different. This is a really important factor. How about subject matter expert in your existing organization, your budget, the adjacent organizations? Who's the board chair? How many major donors do you have? So know your organization, know the field. Know the donor is what we talked about in this area of donor discovery. You want to know the donor. You want to walk through this work with the donor around what are you most passionate about? And in some cases, it's you, you, the solicitor. They're most passionate about you. I have a meeting this afternoon where I did a mindful giving workshop for a donor, and she has identified that all of her giving is guilt and habit, all of it. $45,000 a year out of guilt and habit. Now, what happens there when you know the donor's giving out of guilt and habit? Not only do you have to reveal their passions, how it aligns with their values, you have to give them some language where they might not continue to give those 4 or 5 figure gifts to existing nonprofits. And that's okay, because our work is to have this donor-centered philanthropy and understand how they feel best about their giving. And then finally is to know the ask. Who asks whom for what by when? Or, as I like to say, who asks whom for what by when? Who asks whom for what by when? We could do a whole workshop on your sales pipeline management, your moves management, who's doing the sales pipeline management, what is the ask, who are your account managers, who are your relationship managers. But that is all part of that ask, that you would understand very clearly who asks whom for what by when. And you're using all of the art and science to get to that ask. I was at a workshop with Evolve Giving Group, and the presenter said, if you're nervous about your ask, you don't know enough about your donor. So I walked away with that information, that if you're nervous about your ask, we just don't know enough about our donor. So I'm going to round that out. I'm going to leave everybody excited about the next workshop on sales pipeline management. And I'm going to open us up for questions and answers for about 10 minutes. And then Moshe will come back and explain what comes next. We can just...
Yeah. Thank you so much, Susan. It's funny that you make that plug for sort of a theoretical event, but we actually are just so excited to share with you all that we're launching our certification course coming up. And that's exactly what we're talking about, is how do you build those pipelines for your capital campaigns, your major givers, your mid-tier givers, your modest givers. We know that everything you're sharing, Susan, is the what comes next. You know, once I've identified the people, how do I connect to them? How do I solicit the gifts? How do I cultivate the relationships? The how is how I've heard you put it before. The big, big question mark of the how. In this course, we're going to be showing our participants the who. Who are you? Who are you going after and building those relationships? So yeah, let's open it up for Q&A. And I'm looking over at the chat if anyone popped anything in here. I think you've addressed the most recent thing that was asked. So if you'd like to ask a question, you're welcome to just come off mute. And if we have lots of folks, we can do the hand raising. If lots of folks have questions, we can do the hand raising. Yes, Steve.
Hi, Susan. Hey, quick question for you. How do you start that initial conversation when you've identified somebody? Is that through a cold email, or if you have their phone number, or a cold call, but just letting them know that you want to have a donor engagement conversation and learn what they're passionate about? How do you open that door to have coffee with them?
Okay, will you run into them anywhere in town?
No.
Okay, so you have been identified as a very generous philanthropist in our community. I would start with that. First of all, I would start with people who are already in your pond. So let me just explain about the pond a little bit. Before you go to somebody who is, or I call it the pond, before you go to people outside who are not engaged, do this a little bit with people who are already inside of your network. Now, in your network, you have your donors and you have your users. I don't love the word users, but your program participants. Do you know how many times I say, well, what about the preschool parents where they're not donors? I'm like, yeah, but the nanny drops the 3 kids off in a Tesla every morning. They're not donors. They're prospects. Hello. I say to the JCC CEO, I say, have you been to the pool lately? They have $3,000 strollers and $1,000 coolers, and he's never out there. So I'm out there. I'm a fundraiser. So what you can do is look for who's already inside using your services that has capacity that you do not have on a donor list, and reach out to them first. The second would be, you've been identified as a very generous person in our community. I wanted to learn about your philanthropy. Would you be willing to spend 40 minutes with me at coffee? I'm not going to ask you for a gift. But that is in that outside tier if they're not engaged. Can you take me off of like the big picture so I can see everybody else sort of on this? Can you, yeah, remove spotlight. There I go. Okay. Okay, great. Thanks. Now we're all the same. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you so much, Susan.
Okay, terrific. Other questions? Come on, stump the speaker.
Susan, you had mentioned that you would get back to Wendy's comment that her pain point is donor stewardship. 90% of our donors are from events and P2P. You wanted to say something about events?
Yeah, perfect. They are fishing expeditions. All you did at the event is go fishing. Everybody that I have connected with is like, tactic done. Done. No, tactic just started. You have the event, you have 250 people in the room, you go to your Hatch account and you data mine the 250 people are in the room. You sort by highest capacity and you work in descending order. We do not raise money in alphabetical order because Mark Zuckerberg would be last. We do not raise money in alphabetical order. We raise money in descending order. Highest capacity to lowest capacity. After your event, your job has just begun. The success you will have by building in a 30 to 60 day window post-event to do what I call the real work will be absolutely astounding. I went to an event 2 weeks ago, $180 ticket, and I identified 10 people with the capacity to give $10,000. So the person I'm coaching said to me, well, what do I do with her? She wants to host events. Great, let's do it. Recruitment events for your next conference, 2 of them at her house. Call her today. Ask her if she will host 2 recruitments event for your next conference at her house. He calls me and says she's thrilled she's hosting 2 events. Yay, engaged. 10,000 capacity, gave $180, now hosting 2 events. That is an engagement journey. She's going to go to the conference because she's hosting the recruitment. She's never even been to the conference. Don't care. You have the capacity. You want to host events. We need you to host this. Let's say if we can align that. You got to ask. You know, they say the number one reason people don't give is because nobody asked. Okay, you got to ask. This is truth. Left the event, reviewed the participants. Now, those 10 people who could give 10,000, that's just from my storytelling. They didn't even data mine those 200 people that were in the room. Must, absolutely must. And your crowdfunding campaigns, they are just major fishing expeditions. Love them. I was an early adapter, 2016. I've been doing crowdfunding since 2016. I love them. It brings you a lot of money, but you leave a ton of money on the table. So if you go in and you look at the foundation or donor that gave to you and you see that you're getting under 1% of their philanthropy because they gave $100 to their son from the school on that day, but the data shows that their foundation gives away $4 million a year, these are true stories. Their foundation is giving away $4 million a year and you have $100 and you had a successful campaign. Yay.
Thank you, Susan.
Yes.
I appreciate, I'm like very silent here, but I appreciate that feedback. Most of my donors for my events are corporations. Like we're very heavy. So it's not even individuals, it's mostly large corporations, which I'm extremely grateful for. And, you know, they come back every year because they enjoy the events, you know, but the peer-to-peer, to your point, is just, you know, like it is a fishing. I mean, you know, they don't come back. Maybe they donate once again. So, I mean, I'm new to Hatch and my whole thing is like, we need to figure out how to move people from where they are to where we need them to be, which everything you're saying is amazing. And I'm excited to like, you know, reach out to people and to do that.
Amen. These corporate also, I want to tell you something about foundations. We have a foundation in Denver and I did a discovery with a person who, the family member who runs the foundation and corporations. Where does the corporate philosophy of giving come from? Why did the corporation create an endowment of this size or a foundation of this size? You can still ask these personal kind of questions because what I learned about this foundation is it was created in honor of the grandmother. I know nobody in town knows that it was the grandmother. So now I'm after things for women because it was grandma who instigated the creation of this foundation. I want to ask for things for women and I want to say in the merit of Grandma Millie, I want to ask you to consider because now we know. Now we know. So in corporate also, my first foundation discovery is what was the philosophy of the person who created the principle? And why was this so important to them? Sam Israel at the Samus Foundation in Seattle, you know, like his footprints all over the way Samus gives. That was one of the things I learned, is what was so important for him. So Wendy, for sure, in this peer-to-peer, but in the corporate space, there's also an opportunity. And if you ask the bank why they give this corporate and they don't know, they'll find out, because it's a good question. It's a good question. And they'll go like, you know what? I don't know. I've been working here for 20 years and I don't know. Well, let's find out, both of us together. And I always say the easy people, they don't grow us as professionals. The tough ones. I mean, come on, I've been at this for 30 years. Like those weebles, they wobble, they don't fall down. The tough ones really build us as professionals. So embrace it and
Okay.
hard questions.
Thank you.
Let's take one more question before we close out the Q&A for today.
I have another question that I'm sure might be on other people's minds, but is there a template for those 40-minute meetings that you talk about that we can follow and kind of, throw into our own? Is there any resources for that? Are there any resources?
Yeah, I have discovery questions, and my business manager's on the call. It's like, yep, I have all the discovery questions. We can share them. I'll tell you that the questions are great. One of the things that Avraham Lewis has to help me write a book because he writes. But so thank you, Javi. But Avraham, did you hear that? Will you help me write this book? So anyway, that said, we do have questions. It's not just the questions, it's the journey that you dance through. It's really the dance. So of course I can give you the questions. I want you to establish your own dance, the questions that work for you, the questions that don't feel comfortable for you. So happy to share them. And there's a dance that gets established in that journey. So yes, Wendy, yeah, I'll get them to Moshe and we'll get them.
I have a better idea. I would like to do a live.
Model. Yeah, let's do it. I'm thinking like you, Moshe. I'm thinking like you. Let's do it.
I'm gonna put it out to everybody on this call. And if somebody wants to bring a donor to the table, we know some donors, so we'll have a backup. But I would present it to this call. This whole webinar is really just a start with this whole. We really have this vision of creating really a community around Hatch, and I want everybody to see this as just like this first step into this call. And I think the next step here would be that if somebody on this call would like to volunteer to ask a donor to come to a donor discovery call that's going to be live broadcasted on live TV, to bring them onto this call to take the next step here. Because I think learning is an ongoing thing. I think the best takeaway we can do from this. So if anybody wants to reach out to us directly, if they're going to volunteer to do that, to bring one of your major donors to the table, who'd be willing to volunteer his or her or both couple time to join a donor discovery call. And Susan, you're good with this? Sorry for putting you on the spot.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And we're going to do a live, that's going to be our next webinar. We're going to do a live donor discovery call with a philanthropist. As soon as Susan is going to demonstrate in real time live on how to do a donor discovery call. And you'll get all her secrets from that call. How does that sound? Can we get a thumbs up from everybody on the chat? Does that sound like a good idea? Okay, very good. So whoever's first to emailing sim@hatch.ai, SIM at hatch.ai, whoever's first to emailing him saying that they're going to do it, maybe we'll do two. So you just email, we'll see, we'll work it out. We'll make that happen. I want to kind of, Sim is going to close up with a little bit of a gift for everyone here today who isn't yet a Hatch customer. But I want to just share a thought here to close this up. So I'm going to start with the confession, and then I want to just have one more question for you. Okay, here's the confession. The confession is that many of you know me from my past company of charity.com, and I spent the better part of 8 years empowering organizations to ask, right? Crowdfunding campaigns, ask major donors, get them thinking. It was this kind of this reality distortion field that we created for over 8,000 organizations to get them and to build their confidence for asking major donors to be matchers and asking the community. We did wonders. We raised over $3 billion. We also created 10 competitors. And now we're in this, and now the whole wave of the world has gone into this ask. My confession is that I feel like as a collective, we are asking a little bit too much, and we're not asking in an artful and in a humane way. My confession is that I had to leave charity to start Hatch on a personal level to get people to stop asking. And Susan, my best. This is the irony here, but I'm coming to it. My best line that you said today, ironically, is "Don't ask." Right? What if forget the context? Right? Like if it's the first call, right? Don't ask. Right? The impetus of building this Hatch platform, as much as it is asking to know what to ask, it's more if you would come into it more with this like, where are the opportunities for me to cultivate an individual and not ask? And that's really at the heart of the Hatch platform, is that when we give you all of this information on these individuals, their lifestyles, their skills, their careers, their media attention, their age, their spouse, their children, their family, these are all information they were giving you. These are all opportunities not to ask. These are all opportunities to build relationships with these people. So Susan, I have one, and if you start from there, right? If you kind of flip the script, nonprofits what I was pushing for the last 10 years was spend 10% of your time on cultivation and spend 90% of your time on asking. I've flipped it. Okay. I've flipped it. And I say, guys, we went through 10 years of a lot of asking. We got big databases right now. Now's the time to flip it. Now's the time to let's start spending 90% of our time on cultivating and only 10% of our time on asking. What will happen then is that 10% of asking will be 10x more effective. Okay. So Susan, my last question to you, and then we're going to move to Sim. I hope everyone doesn't mind, or we're going to go about 5 minutes over time. It's now 1 o'clock. We're going to go about 5 minutes overboard. It looks like everyone's engaged. Give us some insight into this don't ask world. Okay. We talk a lot about building relationships. I find, and I'm going to challenge you a little bit, because I find that, I think our philanthropists, our donors, they have enough friends. At the end of the day, as a fundraiser, you're probably not going to be the person there, top 5 people they're going to invite to their birthday party. You might go on a golf outing with them because that's kind of somewhere between a relationship and a corporate, move and a corporate, business-like endeavor. But when we think about relationships, and the expectation is not to become their best friend because their best friends are from childhood or from who they went to high school with. What is this measure? How do we measure, and how do we kind of bring the art and science to this relationship building as a fundraiser?
It's a great question. I call what you're describing as friend-like behavior. Friend-like behavior. So I was 20 years at the Federation. I think I have 7 friends, 20 years, 7 friends.
Yeah.
Forget about the invitations. There's friend-like behavior, but don't mistake that it is friend-like and you're not their BFF. Like, let's not mistake that. A lot of times I say to lay leaders that become professionals, once you're a pickle, you can never be a cucumber again. So if you are a lay turned pro, you are a pickle and you are not seen the same way. Don't call those major donors at 10:45 at night because you used to be friends with them, because now you're the professional and you cannot call them at 10:45 at night. That's not right. And we had that just this week. So what is it around the ask? It is around being authentic, having authenticity. Authentic. You are asking people to really light up the world with their money. If you're authentic, that is the most important thing. I'll say it over and over and over again. This ask comes from authenticity. When we asked this donor for $15,000 and gave her 3 things on that piece of paper, there had been 6 personal conversations. Personal, like, what's your most meaningful gift? You know, like, why did you join that board? How come you've participated? How have you seen the growth of this? It was an early childhood education initiative. She actually started it 15 years ago. It has evolved in the 15 years, and now we asked her for that level gift, a first gift to this organization, even though in its different incarnation she started it. But we knew enough about her as a person and as a philanthropist that we could get to that ask very confidently. Now, the friend-like behavior is critical because if they don't like you, get somebody else to do that ask. Don't try to get that person to like you. Don't do it. It's not it. Forget it. Forget about it. It is okay that they don't like us. Everybody's not going to like everybody. Baskin and Robbins used to have licorice ice cream. Who ate that stuff? But it's okay. They still had 30 other flavors. Fundraising is hockey. It's not tennis. You don't win and your colleagues lose. It doesn't go that way. The organization wins or the organization loses. So if they don't like you, turn to the person in the office next to you and say, you know what? We have very differing opinions on Israel. I don't think I'm the right person to solicit this person. So this relationship, this ask comes because you know them. You know them. And again, it is friend-like behavior, and that's cool, but don't mistake it.
Love it. Love it. They know that you know that they know that you know what they're passionate about, and where and how they're going to make the greatest impact. Love that. Okay. So this is fantastic. I'm going to hand it over to Sim to close us out.
Thank you so much, Moshe. Thank you so much, Susan. And thank you to everyone for attending this discussion today. It's these conversations that power the engine of building the philanthropy of the future that we want to manifest now. It's bringing together the people who we want to reach out to and the art and science of how to build relationships with them. I'm sharing my screen just for about a minute to close out this conversation. We have a coupon code that you can use if you want to sign up today. If you'd like to discuss what a Hatch subscription looks like with one of our sales representatives, just drop us a comment in the chat here. You can email me sim@hatch.ai, and anyone else from the team. We all have email addresses, which is our first name @hatch.ai. You'll be seeing more of Susan as you heard today, and we hold these webinars monthly. Every single month we have a webinar that is just like this, with invaluable insight from Moshe, collaborators across the United States who draw on a wellspring of experience, and we're launching tons of other initiatives that we want to keep you clued into. So be sure to continue checking your inbox. If you've either unsubscribed or if you put us in your spam, maybe consider reversing that so that you actually get the communications from us. It's good stuff. We're really trying to deliver you only the best of the best material, no spam necessary. And if you have any feedback, please give it to me directly. I lead customer success. Ben Bauman's also on the call. He leads product at Hatch. If you've got feedback for us about what you like or dislike about the platform, we operate on radical transparency here. So we want to hear everything and anything from you about what you're enjoying and what we could do better. Thank you so much again. Have a wonderful rest of your week, a Shabbat Shalom, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.